How to conduct a job interview. The job interview situation. The virtual stack of resumes in your inbox is windowed, and certain candidates have passed the phone screen. The next step is in-person interviews. How should you use the relatively brief time to get to know and assess a near stranger, one whom you're probably going to be working with for a long time? How many people at your firm should be involved? How can you tell if a candidate will be a good fit? And finally, should you really ask questions like, what's your greatest weakness? What the experts say. As the employment market improves and candidates have more options, hiring the right person for the job has become increasingly more difficult. Pipelines are depleted and more companies are competing for top talent. Applicants also have more information about each company's selection process than ever before. Career websites like Glassdoor have taken the mystique and mystery out of interviews. If your organization's interview process turns candidates off, they will roll their eyes and find other opportunities. Your job is to assess candidates, but also to convince the best ones to stay. Here's how to make the interview process work for you and for the applicants. Prepare your questions. This is incredibly important. Always be well prepared for your interview with questions ready to go. Know beforehand what you're going to be asking. Before you meet candidates face-to-face, you need to figure out exactly what you're looking for in a new hire so that you're asking the right questions during the job interview. Begin this process by compiling a list of required attributes for their position. For inspiration and guidance, look at your top performers. What do they have in common? What do these top performers do to make them resourceful? How are they resourceful? What did they accomplish prior to working at your organization? What roles did they hold in your organization? Those answers will help you create criteria and enable you to construct relevant questions. An important factor when conducting an interview is reducing stress. Relieving the tension of this often very stressful situation will be better for you and the applicant. Candidates find job interviews stressful because of the many unknowns. What will my interviewer be like? What kinds of questions will he or she ask? How can I squeeze this meeting into my workday? And of course, what should I wear? But when people are stressed, they do not perform as well. It is best to take preemptive steps to lower the candidate's cortisol levels. Tell people in advance the topics you'd like to discuss so they can prepare. This will greatly help them in reducing their stress and create an overall more positive interview experience for both parties. Be willing to meet the person at a time that's convenient to him or her. And explain your organization's dress code. Your goal is to make them comfortable so that you have a productive, professional conversation. When making a decision for a hire, involve the minimum amount of people required to make this decision. When making any big decision, it is important to seek counsel from others, so invite a few trusted colleagues to help with your interview. Monarchy doesn't work. You want to have multiple checks to make sure you hire the right person. But on the other hand, extreme democracy is also ineffective and can result in a long, drawn-out process. It is recommended that three people interview the candidate: the boss, the boss's boss, and a senior HR person or recruiter. Peer interviews can also be really important. Sullivan adds, because they give your team members a say in who gets the job. They will take more ownership of the hire and have reasons to help that person succeed, he says. When conducting an interview, always assess potential of the applicant. Budget at least 2 hours for the first interview. That amount of time enables you to really assess the person's competency and potential. Look for signs of the candidate's curiosity, insight, engagement, and determination. It is important to assume that the person will be promoted and that they will be a manager someday. The question then becomes not only can this person do the job today, but can he or she do the job a year from now when the world has changed? Ask the candidates how he learns and for his thoughts on where your industry is going. No one can predict the future, but you want someone who is thinking about it every day. Ask for real solutions. Don't waste your breath with absurd questions like, what are your weaknesses? When asking this question, you are basically saying, lie to me. Instead, try to discern how the candidate would handle real situations related to the job. After all, how do you hire a chef? Have them cook you a meal. Explain a problem your team struggles with and ask the candidate to walk you through how she would solve it. Or describe a process your company uses and ask her to identify inefficiencies. Go back to your list of desired attributes. If you're looking for an executive who will need to influence a large number of people over whom he won't have formal power, ask, have you ever been in a situation where you had to persuade other people who were not your direct reports to do something? How did you do it? And what were the consequences? Consider cultural fit. Considering the candidate's cultural fit is important, but don't obsess over it. It's a small factor in the decision process. Much has been made about the importance of cultural fit in successful hiring. You should look for signs that the candidate will be comfortable at your organization. Think about your company's work environment and compare it to the candidate's orientation. Is he a long-term planner or a short-term thinker? Is he collaborative or does he prefer working independently? Your perception of a candidate's disposition isn't necessarily indicative of whether he can acclimate to a new culture. People adapt. What you really want to know is, can they adjust? Sell the job. If the meeting is going well and you believe that the candidate is worth wooing, spend time during the second half of the interview, selling the role and the organization. If you focus too much on selling at the beginning, it's hard to be objective. But once you're confident in the candidate, tell the person why you think he or she is a good fit. Bear in mind that the interview is a mutual screening process. The applicant is interviewing the company, and the company is interviewing the applicant. They want to see if they're a good fit for each other. Make the process as fun as possible. Ask them if there's anyone on the team they'd like to meet. The best people to sell the job are those who already live it. Peers give an honest picture of what the organization is like. So have the applicant meet people who are already doing the job. They can give the best representation of what it's like. Principles to remember. Do lower your candidate's stress levels by telling them in advance the kinds of questions you plan to ask. Do ask behavioral and situational questions. Do sell the role and the organization once you're confident in your candidate. Don't forget to do pre-interview prep. List the attributes of an ideal candidate and use it to construct relevant questions. Involve too many other colleagues in their interviews. Do not do this. Multiple checks are good, but too many people can belabor the process. Put too much emphasis on cultural fit. Do not do this. Remember, people adapt. Cultural fit is not that important. Case study. Provide relevant real-life scenarios to reveal how candidates think. The vast majority of hires at Four Kitchens, the web design firm in Austin, Texas, are through employee referrals. So in November, when Todd Ross Nienkerk, the company's co-founder and CEO, had an opening for an account manager, he had a hunch about who should get the job. It was somebody who had been a finalist for a position here years ago, says Todd. We'll call her Deborah. We kept her in mind, and when this job opened, she was the first person we called. Even though Deborah was a favorite candidate, she again went through the company's 3-step interview process. We're not grilling them, but we want to know how they think, and we want to see their personal communication style. But for the account manager role, Todd took a slightly different tack. Before the interview, he and the company's head of business development put together a job description and then came up with questions based on the relevant responsibilities. They started with questions like, what are things you look for in a good client? What are red flags in a client relationship? And how do you deal with the stress? Case study continued. Then Todd presented Deborah with a series of redacted client emails that represented a cross-section of day-to-day communication. Some were standard requests for status updates. Others involved serious contract disputes and pointing questions. We said, pretend you work here. Talk us through how you'd handle this. It put her on the spot, but frankly, this is what the job entails. After a successful first round, Deborah moved on to the second phase, the team interview. In this instance, she met with a project manager, a designer, and 2 developers. These are an opportunity for applicants to find out what it's like to work here, says Todd. But the biggest reason we do it is to ensure that everyone is involved in the process and feels a sense of ownership over the hire. The final stage was the partner interview, during which Todd asked Deborah questions about career goals in the industry. It was also an opportunity for her to ask us tough questions about where our company is headed, he says. Deborah got the job and started earlier this month.